Today I've got a couple of meetings and I gotta go to the Verizon store to return a phone, and of course I had to find some time to work. And also I'm gonna talk a little bit about 5 different myths about racism and also why it doesn't matter. I'm on a conference call. I'm excited about this one because so far I've already gotten tons of great information. Okay, so let's start with myth number 1. Black Lives Matter is racist because all lives matter. And there are a few things going on here. The first thing is that when we say Black Lives Matter, we're saying Black Lives Matter too, also. Because yeah, life is important and valuable and wonderful, but right now, Black lives are not treated as valuable as white lives. We can see this in a lot of different ways. One of the biggest is use of force by police departments. We also see this in interactions in schools. We see this in incarceration numbers. Black people are incarcerated at far greater percentage rates than white people. So the Black Lives Matter conceit is not that all lives don't matter. It's just that Black lives matter, and we have to say that because they are not currently treated like they matter. So Black Lives Matter, comma, too, also. There are also some other questions about Black Lives Matter being some sort of terrorist organization or inciting violence or riots, and all of that's just not true. Black Lives Matter is a movement. It's also an organization. There's some interesting dynamics there, but Black Lives Matter, the organization, has denounced all the violence that's happened by people participating in the movement, and Black Lives Matter, the movement, has basically done the same thing. It's made out of a coalition of organizations and people working on the ground and different activists, so it's a much looser group. There's not exactly one organization to talk to, but they've all kind of denounced violence, and none of them recommend rioting or are in support of hurting anybody. Or the big thing I've heard is that Black Lives Matter is somehow calling for people to kill police officers, which is not true at all. I have never heard that from an activist or a Black Lives Matter adjacent protester, and if I did, I would correct that. And we can't really get to Black Lives Matter too without a recognition of life as valuable. Having left meeting number 1, which is on the phone, now I get to go to our weekly Christchurch meeting, which I haven't been to in like 3 weeks. I'm very excited. Okay, let's see about returning this phone. Christchurch meeting was dope, by the way. I love those people. And of course, returning the phone was the easiest thing I've done all day. A+. Nice work, Verizon. So another thing I hear about a lot is reverse racism, or the fact that white people experience racism too. Pizza for Connor and Melissa. There's definitely prejudice on all sides. There are, certainly Black people that are prejudiced against white people, but for racism to exist, there has to be a power dynamic. And the reality is that white people have power over Black people just because they're dominant and treated as the supreme culture. The default in US culture is a white, straight person. And the power dynamic goes all the way down the line, just like we're talking about with incarcerated people and wealth accumulation. These things all are part of a power dynamic, and it's not about individual people or even families. It's about a system that values white people over Black people. So reverse racism really isn't a thing because the power dynamic's not there. Yeah, I gotta get this pizza to Melissa.
I had a terrific day. Tried to find Norman, and I found him and got a free lollipop. I am eating gummies. They're shaped like penguins. Their Tums, they have this delicious juice. And I right now see an airplane.
So Connor, today I've been talking about racism, and I've been talking about some ideas that people have about black people. The third thing that I'm going to talk about is when people say they're colorblind. They say like, I don't see color. They're kind of saying I try or I want to treat black people and white people with the same humanity, the same way. And that sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But the tricky thing about saying you're colorblind is it's not true. I mean, you can see color. Most people can.
Yes.
Can you see when a person's black?
Yeah.
And can you see when a person's white?
Yeah.
Yeah, most people can see color. And when we say we're colorblind, we're number one, we're kind of lying to ourselves because we can see color. And then number two, we're erasing the blackness of our black friends. And black is good. That's not bad. Being black is good and positive. And we're erasing parts of their culture, parts of their background, and parts of history. And how the country's treated black people, how other white people treat black people sometimes, and how we can help and kind of participate with them and treat them well.
One of my eyes is kind of tearing.
Yeah, I get that. Being colorblind does not work. It's not a good thing. The fourth thing we hear frequently is people say, I don't have any privilege, when they are confronted with the idea of white privilege. The trick here is that privilege is a thing that you're not often aware of, but that doesn't mean you don't have it. As a white person, you have access to places, things, people that you wouldn't necessarily have as a person of color. You're also treated differently in many sections of life, whether that's business or school, by police officers or anyone else. And it's not because of anything you've done. You're getting all of these things. They're not accessible to people of color, and they're not things you earned. So it's sometimes hard to see them until you start looking more deeply into how the world is treating you. So white privilege exists. If you're white, you have it, and there's not really a way around it. And our role and responsibility in that, to be aware of it and use our access to benefit everyone around us. Now, the fifth and final thing I'm going to talk about today, which of course isn't the final way people push back on some of these ideas, but it's just kind of the last thing I have time for today, is the idea that talking about race just causes more division. We have racial tensions, we have race, and it's something we need to talk about in order to address. Whether it's talking about white privilege so that we can consider it and start using our access to benefit other people, or it's talking about slavery and its effects on the modern United States, our economy, generational wealth, all that kind of stuff. It's important to talk about these things because we want to find ways to get to balance, equity, and justice. And without talking and considering these things, we're just not going to get there. It can feel like being attacked. We're never going to be able to address these things and lean into equity and justice if we don't talk about them and consider them thoughtfully. Now, I've talked about these 5 things, and I've tried to talk about them coherently and thoughtfully, but the reality is, even when confronted with these arguments and new information, I'm not going to change anybody's mind with this video. Dealing with new information like this is a lot like dealing with grief. There are stages and a process you have to go through, and nobody can really drag you through it. It's something you need to deal with on your own. What I've experienced with people around me who I've seen kind of evolve on these things, and even with myself, is that having friends and community members around you that are further along in this process is really the only way to make any headway with these ideas. But I do hope that it can be a part of someone's process at some level, and that I can be a part of moving us all forward to equity and justice and to a better world for everyone.